The perfect neighbors Marcus and Zara had been living at 1247 Maple Street for exactly 3 years, 7 months, and 14 days. Not that anyone was counting except them. Every morning, Marcus would emerge from their modest 2-story home to collect the newspaper, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his smile warm and genuine as he waved to joggers passing by. Zara would tend to their impossibly perfect garden, her auburn hair catching the sunlight as she coaxed flowers to bloom in arrangements that seemed almost too beautiful to be natural. Their neighbors adored them. The Hendersons next door often borrowed their ladder. Mrs. Patterson across the street received fresh vegetables from their garden weekly. During last summer's block party, Marcus had organized the children's games, while Zara served homemade lemonade that tasted better than anything from a store. But 10-year-old Noah Kim noticed things others didn't. He was the kind of child who collected bottle caps and memorized license plates, who watched the world with scientific curiosity inherited from his physicist mother. Noah had been 7 when the couple moved in, and he could swear Marcus looked exactly the same now as he had then. Not just well-preserved identical. Same hairline, same faint lines around his eyes, same posture. And there was something about the way Zara spoke to animals. Not baby talk like other adults, but actual conversation. Noah had seen her crouch beside the stray cat that lived under the Hendersons' porch, her lips moving in what looked like serious discussion. The cat had sat perfectly still, as if listening intently, then followed her to their garden where it began methodically hunting the slugs that had been eating the lettuce dot the morning everything changed, started like any other. Marcus collected his newspaper, the physical edition, which Noah's mother found charmingly old-fashioned. Zara emerged with her gardening gloves, humming something that sounded almost like music, but not quite like any song Noah had ever heard. The melody seemed to make the birds gather in unusual numbers, their own songs joining hers in harmonies that made Noah's skin prickle with inexplicable recognition. As Noah watched from his bedroom window, Zara suddenly stopped mid-note. Her head tilted at an angle that seemed just slightly wrong for human anatomy, and her eyes, for just a moment, reflected the morning sunlight like a cat's. Marcus dropped his newspaper and moved to her side with fluid grace, his hand finding hers as they both stared at something Noah couldn't see. In the distance, barely audible over the suburban morning sounds, Noah heard what might have been sirens. But Marcus and Zara were already moving, their peaceful morning routine abandoned as they rushed toward their house with urgent, synchronized steps that spoke of shared purpose and long-practiced coordination. Noah pressed closer to his window, his scientist's mind cataloging details that didn't quite fit the picture of the perfect neighbors everyone believed Marcus and Zara to be. The child who saw too much. Noah had always been told he was too curious for his own good. His mother, Dr. Jennifer Kim, often found him disassembling household electronics or conducting elaborate experiments in the backyard. But this curiosity had given him a unique perspective on the world, and on Marcus and Zara. Over the following weeks, Noah began what he privately called Operation Observation. He noted that Marcus never seemed to sleep. At 2 a.m., when Noah crept to his window during a bout of insomnia, he could see a figure silhouetted against the couple's kitchen window, perfectly still, as if standing guard. During the day, Marcus would mention events from decades past with the casual familiarity of someone who had lived through them, not learned about them from books. Zara's gardening yielded impossible results. Tomatoes in December, roses that bloomed in colors that didn't exist in nature. When Noah had mustered the courage to ask her about it during a chance encounter at the mailbox, she'd smiled and said, "Plants respond to understanding, not just fertilizer." Her hand had briefly touched a wilting dandelion, and Noah could have sworn he saw it straighten and flourish. The most unsettling discovery came during the Hendersons' anniversary party. Noah had been helping carry dishes when he dropped a heavy serving tray. Marcus had caught it mid-fall with reflexes that seemed impossibly fast, his movements fluid and precise in a way that didn't match his apparent age. When their eyes met, Noah saw something ancient and weary in Marcus's gaze, something that spoke of experiences far beyond suburban life. "Careful there, young scientist," Marcus had said, his voice carrying warmth, but also a subtle warning. "Sometimes the most interesting observations are the ones we keep to ourselves." That night, Noah lay awake, puzzling over the comment. How had Marcus known about his scientific interests? They'd barely spoken beyond neighborly pleasantries. Unless Marcus had been watching him as carefully as Noah had been watching them. The breakthrough came during a thunderstorm. Noah was battling another bout of insomnia when lightning illuminated the street in stark white flashes. In one brilliant moment, he saw Zara standing in their backyard, arms raised to the sky, completely still despite the driving rain. But it wasn't her presence that made Noah's heart race. It was the way the lightning seemed to bend around her, creating a protective dome of electrical energy that left her untouched while chaos raged. Mere feet away, as if sensing his observation, Zara turned toward his window. Even through the storm and distance, Noah felt the weight of her gaze. She raised one hand in what might have been a wave or a warning, and then she was gone, moving with impossible speed toward their house. Next morning dawned clear and bright, but Noah felt the weight of knowledge settling on his shoulders. Marcus and Zara weren't just unusual neighbors, they were something else entirely. The question that kept him awake during his mother's early morning conference calls wasn't what they were, but why they were here and what they might be hiding. From Dot, when he saw them working in their garden later that day, their movements synchronized in ways that spoke of deep partnership forged through shared trials. Noah realized he was looking at refugees. The careful way they maintained their perfect facade, the subtle vigilance that never quite left their postures, the way they seemed to be perpetually ready to disappear. It all pointed to people who had learned to hide not from preference, but from necessity. When Secrets Can't Hold the Fire started in the Hendersons' garage on a Tuesday evening in late October. Old paint cans and forgotten gasoline from a broken lawnmower created a perfect storm of combustible materials. By the time someone noticed the smoke, flames were already licking at the shared fence between the Henderson and Kim properties. Noah was helping his mother prepare dinner when the smell of smoke drifted through their kitchen window. Dr. Kim grabbed her phone to call 911, while Noah ran to the front yard where neighbors were already gathering. The fire department was 12 minutes away, an eternity when flames were spreading toward occupied homes. Mr. Henderson was frantically trying to reach his wife, who was trapped in their upstairs bedroom by smoke and flames that had already consumed the stairwell. The crowd watched in horror as the situation deteriorated rapidly. Someone had a ladder, but it was too short to reach the second floor safely. That's when Marcus and Zara peered. They moved through the gathering crowd. With purpose, their usual careful composure replaced by focused determination. Noah watched as they exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes, a silent conversation that ended with simultaneous nods. "Everyone needs to step back," Marcus announced, his voice carrying an authority that made people obey instinctively. Now, what happened next would be replayed on phone cameras and debated in online forums for months to come. Zara approached the burning building and placed her hands against the exterior wall. The flames closest to her touch began to recede, as if responding to her presence. Meanwhile, Marcus moved to the ladder, and with fluid grace that defied human limitations, scaled the building's exterior, using handholds that seemed to appear wherever he needed them. Noah watched in amazement as Marcus reached the second-story window and effortlessly broke through the glass. Moments later, he emerged with Mrs. Henderson in his arms, carrying her as if she weighed nothing. But instead of climbing down, he actually leaped from the second story to the ground, landing with perfect balance and no apparent impact. Crowd erupted in cheers and confusion. Phone cameras captured every moment, but the footage would later be dismissed as tricks of lighting and adrenaline-fueled perception. What couldn't be dismissed was the result. Mrs. Henderson was safe, and the fire was contained to the garage, having mysteriously stopped its spread the moment Zara had touched the building dot as the fire department arrived and paramedics checked. Mrs. Henderson, Noah noticed the careful way Marcus and Zara positioned themselves at the crowd's edge, ready to disappear at a moment's notice. Their heroic actions had saved lives, but Noah could see the cost in their expressions, the weight of exposure, the fear of questions they couldn't answer. When the excitement died down and neighbors began returning to their homes, Noah found himself walking beside the couple. They moved in silence until they reached their property line, where Marcus finally spoke. "Young scientist," he said quietly, "some observations are more dangerous than others." Zara turned to face Noah directly. "But some secrets become impossible to keep when people you care about are in danger. Are you going to leave?" Noah asked, surprising himself with his directness. The couple exchanged another of their wordless conversations. Finally, Zara smiled sadly. "We've been running for a long time. Noah, sometimes you have to decide if you're running toward something or just running away." As they walked toward their front door, Noah realized that everything was about to change, not just for Marcus and Zara, but for their entire neighborhood, and possibly for everyone who had witnessed something impossible explained away by adrenaline and heroism. The courage to stay the video appeared on social media within hours. Shot from multiple angles by different phones, it showed Marcus's impossible leap and Zara's mysterious effect on the flames. The footage was grainy, taken during a chaotic emergency, but certain details couldn't be explained away. Physics professors debated the impossibility of a human surviving that fall. Fire investigators struggled to understand how the flames had been contained without water or chemical suppressants. Noah watched the discussions unfold from his bedroom computer, reading comment threads that ranged from scientific speculation to wild conspiracy theories. Most dismissed the footage as misleading camera angles and emergency adrenaline, but a growing number of people were asking harder questions. His mother knocked on his door the next evening. "Noah, I need to ask you something." Dr. Kim settled on his bed with the careful posture she used when approaching difficult topics. "You've been watching Marcus and Zara for months. What do you think about what happened last night?" Noah had been dreading this conversation. His mother was a physicist. She understood the laws governing motion, energy, and human limitations. She would have seen the same impossibilities he had. "I think," Noah said carefully, "that they're not what they seem to be." Dr. Kim nodded slowly. "The math doesn't work. A human body can't survive that impact, and thermal dynamics don't explain what happened to those flames." She paused. "But they saved Margaret Henderson's life. Does it matter what they are if they're good people?" The question hung in the air. Between them, Dr. Kim studied her son's face, seeing the same analytical mind that had made him an exceptional student, but also recognizing something else, a moral clarity that impressed her. "No," she said finally, "I don't think it does." The next morning, Noah found Marcus and Zara packing boxes in their garage. Their movements had the efficient urgency of people preparing for a quick departure. When they saw him approaching, they paused their work. "You're leaving," Noah said. It wasn't a question. "We've stayed too long already," Marcus replied. "Last night was ... conspicuous. But where will you go?" Zara knelt to Noah's eye level. "We've been running for 15 years. Every time we find a place that feels like home, something happens. That forces us to move on. What are you running from?" The question seemed to hit them both like a physical blow. Marcus and Zara exchanged one of their silent conversations, and Noah saw the weight of years in their expressions: exhaustion, loss, and a deep sadness that spoke of things lost and people left behind. "Our world ended," Marcus said quietly. "We're survivors of something that shouldn't have happened, and there are those who believe we shouldn't have survived. But that's not why we're running anymore," Zara added. "We're running because we've forgotten how to trust anyone with the truth." Noah thought about his mother's words, about the neighbors who had cheered their heroism, about Mrs. Henderson, who was alive because they had chosen to act rather than hide. "What if you didn't run this time?" he asked. "What if you stayed and trusted us?" The suggestion clearly startled them. Marcus and Zara looked at each other with expressions of longing and terror, the faces of people who had been offered something they desperately wanted but were afraid to accept. "Noah," his mother's voice called from their backyard, "could you ask Marcus and Zara to come over? I'd like to speak with them." The three of them walked to the Kim house together, where Dr. Kim waited with a pot of coffee and a laptop displaying the viral video footage. She gestured for them to sit at the kitchen table. "I'm a physicist," she began without preamble. "I understand the laws governing what should and shouldn't be possible. I also understand that sometimes reality is more complex than our current understanding allows." She turned the laptop toward them, showing the clearest frame of Marcus's. "Leap, this shouldn't be possible. But it happened, and Margaret Henderson is alive because of it." Marcus and Zara sat in tense silence, clearly prepared for confrontation or interrogation. Instead, Dr. Kim closed the laptop and smiled. "I'd like to invite you to stay for dinner. I think it's time we got to know our neighbors properly." Humanity Rising, the conversation that followed, changed everything. Sitting around the Kim family's kitchen table, Marcus and Zara finally shared their truth. They spoke of Kepler 442b, their home world, where two species had coexisted for millennia, before ideological differences erupted into planetary war. They described the evacuation ships, the long journey through space, and the careful process of adaptation that had allowed them to live among humans. "We chose Earth," Zara explained, "because your species showed the most promise for growth. You're young, relatively speaking, but you have something many older civilizations lose, the capacity for change." Dr. Kim listened with the focused attention of a scientist encountering a new paradigm. "How many of you are here?" "Scattered across the globe," Marcus replied. "Never more than a few in any location. We learned early that isolation was safer than community." "Safer from what?" The question brought pain to both their faces. From those who believed the war should have ended with extinction rather than exile. Marcus said, "And from the possibility that we might be rejected by the people we've come to consider neighbors." Noah, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke. "But you saved Mrs. Henderson. You've helped everyone in the neighborhood. Why would people reject you for that?" It was Dr. Kim who answered. "Because fear of the unknown is often stronger than gratitude for good deeds. People can be afraid of what they don't understand, even when that unknown has proven beneficial." The conversation continued late into the evening, covering topics from interstellar travel to the philosophy of coexistence. As the night progressed, Noah noticed his mother growing more animated, her scientific curiosity overriding any concerns about the impossibility of their situation. "I want to propose something," Dr. Kim said as the evening wound down. "I think it's time to stop running." Marcus and Zara looked at her with a mixture of hope and terror. "I'm going to speak with our neighbors," she continued, "not to expose you, but to prepare them. People aren't as fragile as you think. They're capable of growth, of acceptance, of recognizing goodness, regardless of its origin." "Jennifer," Marcus said, using her first name for the first time, "you're asking us to trust our lives to the good nature of people we barely know." "No," she replied. I'm asking you to trust your lives to people who have been your neighbors for 3 years. People who have borrowed your ladder, eaten your vegetables, and invited you to their celebrations. People who saw you risk everything to save one of their own. The next morning, Dr. Kim began what she privately called Operation Community Building. She started with Mrs. Henderson, who was recovering well but remained profoundly grateful for her rescue. The conversation was careful, exploratory, focusing on the character of the people who had saved her life rather than the physics-defying methods they had used. They're special people, Mrs. Henderson said. I've known that since. They moved in. Good neighbors, good hearts. Whatever makes them special, I'm grateful for it. Similar conversations took place across the neighborhood over the following weeks. Dr. Kim had an advantage. Her scientific reputation lent weight to her words, and her methodical approach helped people process concepts that might otherwise seem impossible. The breakthrough came during the next block party. Marcus and Zara appeared as they always did, bringing homemade food and genuine smiles. But this time, the conversations were different. People asked deeper questions, looked at them with new awareness, and gradually began to understand that their wonderful neighbors were even more wonderful than they had imagined. When young Tommy Chun asked Zara directly if she was from space or something, the entire party went quiet. Zara looked around at the faces of people who had become her community, took a deep breath, and said simply, yes. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds before Mrs. Henderson spoke up. Well, that explains the amazing garden. I always wondered how you got those tomatoes to grow so well. The laughter that followed was genuine and warm, and Noah watched as Marcus and Zara's expressions shifted from terror to amazement to something that looked like coming home. Later, as the party wound down and neighbors began sharing stories about unusual abilities and asking fascinated questions about other worlds, Noah found himself walking with Marcus and Zara toward their house. You were right, Zara said to him, about trusting us, about humanity being ready. We're not perfect, Noah replied with the wisdom of someone who had observed both human nature and something beyond it. But we're pretty good at figuring out who the good guys are. As they reached their front door, Marcus turned back to look at the neighborhood where they had finally found home. 15 years of running, he said. I never imagined it would end with a block party. Every ending is just a new beginning, Zara added, and for the first time since Noah had known them, they looked like people who were planning to stay. That night, as Noah looked out his bedroom window at the house where his extraordinary neighbors lived their ordinary lives, he understood something fundamental about humanity. They were a species defined not by their limitations, but by their capacity to grow beyond them. And sometimes that growth came from the simple act of accepting that the universe was bigger and more wonderful than they had previously imagined. The story of Marcus and Zara became neighborhood legend, then local curiosity, and a quiet example of what was possible when fear gave way to understanding. But for Noah, it remained what it had always been, a reminder that the best neighbors were often the ones who taught you something new about the world and about yourself.